The cast-off, the Tesseran High Command Chamber, gleamed with polished obsidian and the harsh blue lights favored by the species. Commander Vex Toran stood tall, his scaled skin catching the light as he addressed the assembled officers. His daughter, Nima, stood in the center of the room, her slender frame seeming to shrink under the collective gaze of the military elite. "She is unsuitable," Vex announced, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. 20 cycles of age, and still she cannot complete basic combat trials. She lacks the endurance, the strength, the will of a true Tesseran. Nima's iridescent scales dulled slightly, a physiological response to her shame. Among Tesserans, vibrant coloration indicated health and strength. Hers had always been paler than others of her kind, another mark of her perceived deficiency. "Father, she began, her voice barely a whisper. Silence. Commander Vex didn't shout. He didn't need to. "You have been given every advantage. The finest training, genetic enhancements, neural stimulation, yet you remain defective." The officers around the chamber shifted uncomfortably. Several nodded in agreement. A few looked away. "As of this moment, you are no longer recognized as a daughter of House Toran. You will be assigned to the diplomatic vessel Eternal Vigilance as a cultural attaché for the human delegation. Perhaps your weakness will be less offensive to them." Nima's eyes widened. Exile, disgrace, abandonment, all wrapped in the thin veneer of a diplomatic posting. "The decision is final," Vex said, turning his back on her. "You leave tomorrow." Captain Elias Reed of the United Earth Coalition watched the Tesseran diplomatic vessel through the view screen of his ship, the Horizon Breaker. The rendezvous had been arranged weeks ago, a simple exchange of cultural envoys meant to ease tensions between humanity and the Tesseran sovereignty. "They're intimidating, aren't they?" Lieutenant Zhang said from her station. "All those spikes and angles. You'd think a spacefaring species would design for aerodynamics." Elias smiled. "They evolved from apex predators. I think looking scary is half the point." The comm system chimed. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Tesseran vessel. Put it through." The screen flickered, and the imposing visage of a Tesseran officer appeared. "Captain Reed, I am Subcommander Krex. We are prepared to transfer our cultural attaché to your vessel as agreed." "We're ready to receive them," Elias replied, "and our envoy is prepared for transfer as well." "There has been a change," Krex said flatly. "We will not be accepting a human envoy at this time," Elias frowned. "That wasn't our arrangement. Circumstances have changed. You will receive our attaché only. This is non-negotiable." Before Elias could respond, the transmission cut off. "Charming," Zhang muttered. Elias tapped his fingers against the arm of his chair. "Something's off. Why send us their representative but refuse ours?" "Maybe they're just being jerks," Zhang suggested. "It wouldn't be the first time." "No, there's something else happening here." Elias stood up. "I'll meet their attaché personally in the docking bay. Lieutenant Zhang, you have the bridge." The Tesseran shuttle docked with mechanical precision. Elias waited as the airlock cycled, flanked by 2 security officers. When the door finally hissed open, he was surprised to see a single slight Tesseran, female, step through. She was nothing like the imposing warriors he'd encountered in previous diplomatic meetings. Her scales were a pale blue-violet rather than the deep indigo typical of her species. She carried no weapons, wore no armor, only a simple gray robe with the insignia of a civilian diplomatic corps. "Captain Reed," she said, her voice soft, "I am Nima. I have been assigned as cultural attaché to your vessel." Elias noticed the way she held herself, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Every gesture screamed submission, completely at odds with typical Tesseran body language. "Welcome aboard the Horizon Breaker, Nima. I'm surprised they sent you alone. A flicker of something. Pain, shame, crossed her features. It was deemed sufficient. As Elias led her from the docking bay, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The Tesserans were a proud, martial society. They wouldn't send a single, seemingly vulnerable individual as their representative unless she wasn't a representative at all. The realization hit him as they entered the lift. This wasn't a diplomatic exchange. This was a disposal. 3. Days later, as the Horizon Breaker patrolled the edge of Tesseran space, Elias found Nema in the ship's observation lounge, staring out at the stars. She spent most of her time there, quiet and alone. "May I join you?" he asked. She startled slightly, then nodded. "Of course, Captain." Elias sat across from her. "You haven't been what I expected. I apologize if I have disappointed." "No, that's not what I meant." Elias leaned forward. "You're not really a cultural attaché, are you?" Nema's scales dulled further, confirmation enough. "Why did they send you here, Nema?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then, "Because I am unwanted, defective, a stain on my father's honor." "Your father?" "Commander Vex Toran of the High Command." Elias tried not to show his surprise. Vex Toran was infamous among human military, a brilliant but ruthless tactician responsible for several brutal campaigns against coalition outposts. "What makes you defective in their eyes?" he asked carefully. Nema gestured at herself. "Everything. I lack strength, endurance, aggression. I cannot fight as Tesserans should. My reflexes are too slow, my instincts too gentle." The last word was spoken with such self-loathing that Elias winced. "So they cast you out?" "Yes. Assigned to your ship because they assumed humans would not notice my inadequacies. Or perhaps because they do not care if I never return." Elias considered, her words carefully. "What if they're wrong? What if you're not defective at all?" She looked up, confusion evident. "I do not understand." "In my experience," Elias said, "societies that value only one kind of strength often miss others entirely." Before she could respond, the ship's alert system blared. Elias's comm buzzed. "Captain to the bridge immediately!" Chaos greeted them on the bridge. Tactical displays showed 3 Tesseran attack vessels approaching rapidly, weapons hot. "What the hell?" Elias demanded. "We're in the designated neutral zone." "They're not responding to hails, Captain," communications reported. "They've already disabled our long-range communications." Nema froze at the sight of the Tesseran ships. "Those are hunter-killers," she whispered. "Elite squadrons. They're not here for diplomacy." "Why would they attack us now during peace talks?" Zhang asked. Nema's expression darkened. "Because there never were any real peace talks. My assignment to your ship was a pretext." Elias turned to her sharply. "A pretext for what?" "I don't know. But those ships—" She stopped mid-sentence, her head tilting slightly. "Something's wrong with their approach vector." "What do you mean?" Elias asked. Nema moved to the tactical display, studying it intently. "They're using the Koresh formation, but it's flawed. The lead ship is too far forward. It creates a vulnerability." Her fingers traced the pattern on the screen. "Here, a blind spot in their sensor coverage." Elias studied her with newfound interest. "How do you know that?" "I was raised in the High Command. I couldn't fight, but I could listen, watch, learn." She looked up at him, her eyes suddenly showing a spark he hadn't seen before. "Captain, I think I can help." "This is insane," Zhang muttered as their shuttle sped silently through the debris field, systems running at minimal power to avoid detection. "Probably," Elias agreed from the pilot's seat. "But it's our only shot." Beside him, Nema sat rigid with concentration, eyes fixed on the navigational display. "Adjust course 3 degrees starboard," she said. "The lead hunter-killer's blind spot should be just ahead." Elias made the adjustment, guiding the small craft through the gap Nema had identified, a narrow corridor of space where overlapping sensor networks failed to connect properly. "If you're wrong about this," Zhang began. "I'm not," Nema said, with surprising firmness. "My father designed this attack pattern. I know its flaws." They slipped past the Tesseran vessels undetected, heading toward a small moon that orbited the gas giant nearby. "The communication relay station should be on the far side," Nema said. "If we can reach it, you can send a distress signal to your fleet." Elias glanced at her. "Why are you helping us? They're your people." Nema was quiet for a moment. "They stopped being my people when they decided I had no value." She met his gaze. "And you asked what if they were wrong about me. No one has ever considered that possibility before." The shuttle touched down on the moon's surface near the automated relay station. As Elias and Zhang prepared to disembark, a proximity alarm sounded. "We've got company," Zhang reported. "Small craft, Tesseran design, coming in fast." Elias checked the weapons locker, grabbing a pulse rifle. "They must have spotted us after all. Zhang, get to the relay and send that signal. I'll hold them off." "Captain," Nema interrupted, "I should go with Lieutenant Zhang. I know Tesseran communication. Protocols, I can help bypass their security measures." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "Go. And Nema, be careful." As the two women disappeared toward the relay station, Elias positioned himself at the shuttle's entrance, weapon ready. The Tesseran craft landed 50 meters away, and 4 heavily armed warriors emerged, moving with predatory grace. Elias took aim at the first, but before he could fire, the warrior spotted him and shouted to the others. They scattered, taking cover behind rock formations. "Surrender the defective female," one called out in heavily accented English. "Do this, and you may yet live." "Not going to happen," Elias shouted back. "She is worthless. Why die for her?" Elias didn't answer, instead firing a series of pulses that forced the warriors to keep their heads down. But he was outnumbered and outflanked. It was only a matter of time. A voice crackled through his comm. "Captain, it's Zhang. We've reached the relay, but there's a problem. The security is more complex than we anticipated." "Figure it out, Lieutenant," Elias grunted, firing again as one of the warriors tried to advance. "Working on it, sir, but—" A burst of static cut through the transmission. The Tesserans were closing in now, coordinating their movements with military precision. Elias fell back, seeking better cover, but a plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He dropped to one knee, gritting his teeth against the pain. The lead warrior approached, weapon raised. "Where is she, human? Where is the defective?" Elias glared up at him. "Her name is Nema," the warrior scoffed. "A name unworthy of remembering. Now, one last time." He never finished the sentence. The relay station behind them suddenly blazed with light as its primary antenna activated, broadcasting at full power. The Tesserans turned toward the unexpected distraction. That was when Nema appeared, running from the station with Zhang close behind. But instead of heading toward the shuttle, she veered directly toward the Tesseran warriors. "What the hell is she doing?" Elias gasped. Nema moved with startling speed, not the powerful charge of a Tesseran warrior, but something different, fluid, efficient, almost graceful. She slipped past the first warrior's guard, using his own momentum to send him sprawling, then ducked beneath another's swing, delivering a precise strike to a vulnerable point on his armor. The warriors, caught off guard by her unexpected approach, struggled to adjust. They were trained to counter strength with strength, not this strange, flowing style of combat. Zhang reached Elias, helping him up. "Sir, we need to move." The relay broadcast the distress signal, but it also alerted every Tesseran in the system to our location. "We can't leave her," Elias insisted, watching as Nema continued to evade the increasingly frustrated warriors. "We're not," Zhang said. with a grin. That was the plan all along. She's the distraction. As if on cue, Nima disengaged from the combat and sprinted toward them. Behind her, the warriors recovered and gave chase. "Go!" she shouted. "I'll hold them off." "Like hell." "You will," Elias growled, raising his rifle with his good arm and laying down covering fire. "Get in the shuttle now, both of you!" They raced aboard, and Zhang rushed to the cockpit. The engines flared to life as the Tesserans opened fire. Plasma bolts struck the hull, but the shuttle was already rising, breaking free of the moon's light gravity. Inside, Elias stared at Nima in amazement. "How did you do that? I thought you said you couldn't fight." Nima looked down at her hands, seeming surprised herself. "I can't. Not like they can. But when I saw you wounded, something changed. I moved without thinking, using what I observed from watching them train my whole life, but differently." Elias nodded slowly. "That's what I meant before. Different strength, not no strength." He winced as Zhang's evasive maneuvers jostled his injured shoulder. "The relay worked," Zhang called back. "Coalition forces are responding. ETA 20 minutes. But those hunter-killers are moving to intercept us." Nima moved to the tactical station, studying the displays. "There's a route through the asteroid field. They won't expect that. Tesseran doctrine considers it too risky." Elias and Zhang exchanged a look. "You trust me?" Nima asked quietly. "Yes," Elias said without hesitation. "I do." He watched as Nima began plotting the course, her movements becoming more confident with each passing second. For the first time since he'd met her, her scales brightened, catching the light with hints of vibrant purple and blue. "You know," he said, "on Earth we have a saying. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." Nima looked up, questioning. "It means," Elias explained, "that sometimes what one person throws away turns out to be exactly what another person needs." He smiled through the pain in his shoulder. "I think you and I have a lot to teach each other, Nima." As the shuttle plunged into the asteroid field, pursued by the forces of her former people, Nima felt something she had never experienced before, a sense of purpose, of belonging, of potential. "Yes," she said, "I believe we do." The return, the Grand Council Chamber of Earth's Unified Defense Command, was designed to intimidate. Tiered seating rose in concentric circles around a central speaking platform, placing the speaker under the scrutiny of hundreds of eyes. Today, those eyes were fixed on Nima. She stood tall, her scales shimmering with subtle patterns of light, a Tesseran expression of confidence that would have been unthinkable to her 6 months ago. Behind her sat Captain Elias Reed, along with Admiral Chen and the senior staff of the Horizon Breaker. The Tesseran offensive against Io was merely the first phase, Nima explained, gesturing to the holographic display floating above the platform. What our intelligence has uncovered suggests a multi-stage campaign designed to systematically dismantle coalition defenses before launching a full-scale invasion. General Santos, head of coalition forces, leaned forward. "And you're certain of this assessment?" "I am," Nima replied without hesitation. "The tactics mirror those my father developed during the Arcturus campaign. A systematic approach to dismantling an enemy's infrastructure before they realize they're at war." "Your father," Santos repeated, emphasizing the word with skepticism. "The same father who cast you out as defective, the same father whose command ship you infiltrated." Nima met his gaze steadily. "Yes, Commander Vex Toran, who raised me in the heart of Tesseran High Command, where I spent 2 decades observing their strategies, their doctrines, their weaknesses." A murmur ran through the assembly. "Weaknesses you claim to understand better than they do themselves," Santos pressed. "Not claim, General. Demonstrate." Nima manipulated the holographic display, highlighting key Tesseran fleet movements. Our operation disrupted their command structure precisely because I understood vulnerabilities they refused to acknowledge: rigidity in their tactical doctrine, over-reliance on hierarchical command, inability to adapt to unexpected variables. Admiral Chen stepped forward. With respect, General, Ms. Toran's intelligence has been verified by coalition analysts. Her assessment of the IO offensive proved correct in every detail, saving thousands of lives and preserving our helium-3 reserves. Santos studied Nima with narrowed eyes. Even if we accept your analysis, Ms. Toran, what do you propose we do about it? The coalition fleet is outnumbered 3-1 by Tesseran forces. Numbers aren't everything, General, Nima replied. The Tesseran military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force applied with rigid precision. It's effective against opponents who fight the same way, but fundamentally vulnerable to asymmetric approaches. You're suggesting we can't match their strength, so we should fight differently, Santos said, skepticism evident in his tone. I'm suggesting that different kinds of strength applied strategically can overcome seemingly superior force, Nima corrected. Captain Reed has taught me this principle, and it's proven effective time and again. Elias stepped up beside her. What Nima proposes isn't just a tactical adjustment, General. It's a fundamental shift in how we approach this conflict. One that leverages human adaptability against Tesseran rigidity. The debate continued for hours as Nima presented her analysis of Tesseran weaknesses and proposed counter-strategies. Some council members remained skeptical, but others began to see the merit in her unconventional approach. Finally, General Santos raised a hand for silence. I've heard enough. While I remain cautious about placing coalition security in the hands of a Tesseran, even one who has proven her loyalty, the evidence supports Ms. Toran's assessment. He turned to Admiral Chen. Implement the proposed countermeasures. But, he added with a hard look at Nima, at the first sign of failure, we revert to conventional doctrine. As the council session adjourned, Elias found Nima standing alone, by a viewport, gazing out at the earth below. Congratulations, he said. Not everyone could convince the most stubborn military minds in the coalition to completely rethink their strategy. They haven't been convinced yet, Nima replied. Only persuaded to consider an alternative. The real test comes next. Elias nodded soberly. The intercepted communications suggest your father has taken personal command of the Tesseran offensive. Fleet. Yes. A complex pattern rippled across Nima's scales, the Tesseran equivalent of a troubled sigh. He won't underestimate me a second time. Are you prepared to face him again? She turned to look at him. The first time I faced him to prove something to myself. This time I face him to protect something I believe in. That makes all the difference. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Coalition forces repositioned according to Nima's strategy, adopting unconventional formations that confused Tesseran long-range sensors. Small, fast-attack vessels were modified for enhanced maneuverability, sacrificing armor for speed in ways that traditional military doctrine would have rejected. Throughout it all, Nima worked closely with coalition tacticians, teaching them to understand Tesseran psychology, the cultural blind spots and rigid thinking patterns that could be exploited. In return, they taught her human approaches to warfare that emphasized flexibility, improvisation, and asymmetric response. Dr. Kaplan and her team continued to refine the neural interface of Nima's exosuit, enhancing its capabilities based on data from the command ship infiltration. The new version was lighter, faster, and more deeply integrated with Nima's unique neurophysiology. One evening, as Nima completed a training session in the modified suit, she found Elias watching from the observation deck. Impressive, he said as she joined him. You've mastered that system completely now. It feels like part of me, she admitted. Like it's always been there, waiting to be discovered. Just like your true strength, she nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that. about what strength really means. And what conclusions have you reached? That my father and I were both right, in a way. Strength is essential, but not just one kind of strength. There's strength in flexibility, in understanding, in seeing what others miss. She looked at him. There's strength in allowing yourself to be changed by new perspectives. Elias smiled. That might be the greatest strength of all, something both humans and Tesserans often struggle with. Their conversation was interrupted by a priority alert from the command center. Admiral Chen's voice came through the comm system. Captain Reed, Ms. Torin, the Tesseran fleet has changed course. They're accelerating toward Mars Colony. All personnel to battle stations. Mars Colony, with its population of 3 million. Civilians and crucial atmospheric processors represented both a strategic target and a terrible vulnerability. The massive Tesseran fleet had bypassed coalition forces, using a maneuver that Nema recognized with cold dread. The Phantom Thrust, she explained on the bridge of the Horizon Breaker as they raced toward Mars. It's a feint within a feint, making us think they were targeting Earth's moon bases, then revealing their true objective as Jupiter's moons, only to strike at Mars instead. Why didn't you anticipate this? Lieutenant Zhang asked, voicing what others were thinking. Because it's not a standard doctrine, Nema replied. It's a desperation move, used only when a commander is willing to sacrifice substantial forces for a decisive advantage. She met Elias's gaze. My father is changing his approach. Adapting, Elias said. Learning from you. Yes, which means our original strategy must also evolve. The Horizon Breaker, along with a hastily assembled coalition task force, arrived at Mars to find the colony's defensive grid already under assault. The massive Tesseran warships maintained a disciplined formation as they systematically targeted key infrastructure. They're focusing on the atmospheric regulators, Zhang reported. If those fail, the terraforming process reverses. Everyone on the surface would have minutes, not hours. He's forcing our hand, Nema said grimly. Either we engage his superior force directly, or we lose Mars. Elias studied the tactical display. What would your father expect us to do? Conventional doctrine would call for a concentrated thrust at his command ship, trying to decapitate. The offensive, Nema replied. He'll have prepared for that. Then we don't give him what he expects. Elias turned to communications. Patch me through to Admiral Chen. The battle plan that emerged was audacious, borderline reckless. While the main coalition fleet engaged the Tesseran forces head-on, seeming to follow conventional doctrine, the Horizon Breaker and 3 other specialized vessels would attempt. A maneuver Nema had developed based on her understanding of both Tesseran blind spots and human adaptability. The Shadow Conjunction, she called it. Using Mars' 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos, as gravitational slingshots, their small force would execute a series of precision jumps to approach the Tesseran command ship from an angle their sensors weren't designed to monitor. It's never been attempted in combat, Admiral Chen warned during the final briefing. The timing margins are razor thin. Which is precisely why it will work, Nema insisted. Tesseran tactical doctrine doesn't account for maneuvers this unorthodox. As the main coalition fleet engaged the Tesseran armada in what appeared to be a desperate conventional assault, the Horizon Breaker led its small squad on a different approach, using minimal power to avoid detection as they positioned themselves for the gravitational assist. On the bridge, tension was palpable. One miscalculation in their trajectory could send them crashing into a moon or drifting helplessly into space. First junction in 3, 2, 1, Zhang called out. The ship shuddered as it skimmed past Phobos, using the moon's gravity to alter its course while conserving power. 2 more such maneuvers followed in quick succession, each bringing them closer to the blind spot Nema had identified in the Tesseran sensor network. We're in position, Zhang reported finally. Tesseran command. Ship directly ahead. They show no signs of having detected us. Elias turned to Nema. It's your strategy that got us here. What's your call? She hesitated only briefly. Launch the EMP drones, then prepare boarding teams. We disable their systems, then I lead the infiltration, just as before. That's not the plan we discussed with Admiral Chen, Zhang pointed out. We were supposed to launch a conventional attack once in position. The situation has changed, Nima replied. Look at their formation. They're already adapting to the main fleet's attack pattern. A conventional strike from our position would be anticipated and countered. She turned to Elias. Trust me. This is the way. After a moment's consideration, Elias nodded. Launch the EMP drones. Prepare boarding teams. Lieutenant Zhang, you have the bridge. Nima and I will lead the infiltration. Both of you? Zhang asked, surprised. Both of us, Elias confirmed. Sometimes the most effective strategy is the most unexpected one. The EMP drones struck with perfect synchronization, temporarily disabling sections of the Tesseran command ship's defensive systems. As the vessel's crew scrambled to respond to this unexpected attack, two stealthed boarding shuttles attached to the hull near a maintenance airlock. Nima, clad in her advanced exosuit, led the first team. Elias, wearing a standard tactical suit, followed with the second. Their objective was clear: reach the command center and force a surrender before the rest of the Tesseran fleet could respond. They encountered fierce resistance almost immediately. Tesseran warriors, recognizing the threat to their command structure, fought with desperate intensity. But Nima moved through them like water through stone, her exosuit enhancing her natural abilities as she neutralized combatants with precise, non-lethal strikes. They're adapting to your approach, Elias warned as they fought their way deeper into the ship, changing their tactics to counter your style. Then we change too, Nima replied, smoothly shifting to a different combat pattern, one she and Elias had developed together, blending Tesseran power with human unpredictability. The defenders, trained to respond to familiar threats, struggled to counter this hybrid approach. Slowly but steadily, the boarding teams advanced toward the command center. Security bulkhead ahead, reported Sergeant Mills. Heavy reinforcement. They know where we're headed. Nima studied the barrier. There's another way. Maintenance shaft 7B runs parallel to this corridor and emerges directly in the command center. Another crawl through the ducts? Elias asked with a wry smile. Not this time. Nima gestured to a seemingly solid wall panel. The access point is concealed, but I know where to look. One of the advantages of growing up watching ship construction. With her guidance, they located and opened the hidden access port. Nima and Elias would take this route, while the rest of the team created a diversion at the main bulkhead. The maintenance shaft was narrow but navigable for both of them. They moved quickly, using the ship's internal schematics displayed in Nima's exosuit to avoid security checkpoints and sensor clusters. We're almost there, Nima whispered as they approached the final access panel. The command center is just beyond this bulkhead. She hesitated, her hand on the panel. My father will be there. Elias placed his hand on her shoulder. Are you ready for this? I have to be. She took a deep breath, then looked at him with sudden intensity. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that finding a place where my differences were valued, not despised, changed everything for me. Before he could respond, she activated the access panel. It slid open silently, revealing the Tesseran command center beyond. Unlike their previous infiltration, this time they were expected. A dozen Tesseran warriors stood in defensive positions around the central command platform, and there at the center stood Commander Vex Toran. He looked exactly as Nima remembered, tall, imposing, his scales the deep indigo of pure Tesseran lineage, adorned with the gold-flecked patterns that signified his rank. But there was something different in his eyes now, something beyond anger or disgust. recognition, uncertainty. "So," he said as Nema and Elias stepped into the command center, "the defective returns, bringing her human master with her." "Not her master," Elias replied calmly. "Her friend." Vex snorted derisively. "Tesserans don't have friends. We have subordinates, superiors, or enemies." His gaze fixed on Nema. "You've chosen your category, daughter." "I've chosen a different path entirely," Nema replied. "One you could never imagine because it exists outside your rigid understanding of strength and value." She stepped forward, ignoring the warriors who tensed at her movement. "The Coalition fleet has engaged your forces. Your sensors are compromised. Your defensive strategy is failing. You have one opportunity to end this without further bloodshed. By surrendering to a creature I deemed too weak to bear my house name?" Vex laughed harshly. "I would rather die." "I'm not asking for your surrender to me," Nema clarified. "I'm offering you the chance to negotiate with the Coalition, to find a resolution that doesn't end with the destruction of everything you've built." Vex's eyes narrowed. "Why would you offer this, after all I've done?" "Because unlike you, I've learned that true strength lies in creating possibilities, not eliminating them." Nema deactivated her exosuit's combat protocols, a gesture of vulnerability that caused murmurs among the warriors. "I'm offering you the chance to see beyond the limitations of your own doctrine, just as I have." For a long moment, the command center was silent as Vex Toran stared at his daughter. The scales along his neck shifted in subtle patterns, a Tesseran expression of deep internal conflict. "You were right about one thing," he said finally. "I never imagined this path for you. Never saw this possibility." He gestured to her. "Exosuit. This technology, this fighting style you've developed, it's unlike anything in our combat doctrine. Because it embraces difference rather than rejecting it," Nema explained. "It finds strength where you saw only weakness." Vex studied her with new eyes. "Show me." She glanced at Elias, who nodded slightly. Then she reactivated her exosuit, but not in combat mode. Instead, she engaged the demonstration protocol they had developed for training purposes. Moving to the center of the command platform, Nema began a series of fluid, precise movements. The exosuit enhanced and amplified her natural grace, creating patterns of movement that were both beautiful and deadly in their efficiency. It wasn't Tesseran combat, rigid, direct, overwhelming, but neither was it purely human. It was something new, a synthesis born of her unique perspective. As she moved, the tactical displays around the command center shifted, showing combat simulations that demonstrated the effectiveness of her approach against traditional Tesseran tactics. Warriors who had been ready to attack moments before now watched with growing fascination. When she finished, Vex Toran stepped forward. His expression was unreadable, but his voice held a note Nema had never heard before. "All these years," he said quietly, "I thought you were broken, defective, a failure of breeding and training." He gestured to the tactical displays. "But this isn't failure, it's innovation." "An innovation born of necessity," Nema replied. "Because I couldn't be what you demanded, I had to become something else entirely." Vex turned to look at Elias. "And you, human, you saw this potential when I could not?" "I saw someone different," Elias answered simply. "In my culture, we've learned, sometimes painfully, that difference isn't weakness. It's often the source of our greatest strengths." The commander was silent for a long moment, internal conflict, evident in the shifting patterns of his scales. Finally, he turned to his senior officers. "Signal the fleet. Cease offensive operations." As they moved to comply, he faced Nema again. "I will speak with your coalition representatives. Not in surrender, but in negotiation. Relief washed through Nema, visible in the sudden brightening of her scales. "Thank you, Father." He held up a hand. "Do not mistake this for reconciliation, daughter. You have proven your approach has merit, but you have also humiliated the sovereignty and defied your lineage." "I defied a lineage that rejected me," Nema corrected gently. "And in doing so, I may have discovered a path that benefits both our peoples." Vex studied her for a long moment. "Perhaps. We shall see." 1 month later, Nema stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned diplomatic vessel Convergence, watching as representatives from Earth and the Tesseran sovereignty signed the preliminary accords that would end hostilities and begin a new era of cautious cooperation. The terms were far from perfect. Centuries of distrust couldn't be erased with a single treaty, but it was a beginning, one that might never have been possible without the crisis that had brought them to this point. Elias joined her at the viewport. "Quite a view, isn't it?" She nodded. "More than the ceremony, the possibility it represents." "Your father seems to have embraced that possibility with surprising enthusiasm," Elias observed. "The Tesseran Diplomatic Corps has been completely restructured under his direction." "He's adaptable when forced to be," Nema replied with a small smile, "a trait I perhaps inherited from him, though neither of us recognized it." They watched in comfortable silence as the formal proceedings continued below. Admiral Chen caught their eye from the diplomatic floor and gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement, recognition of their role in creating this moment. "The Coalition has offered you a permanent position," Elias said after a while. "Special advisor on interspecies relations, with your own command if you want it." "And you? Will you return to the Horizon Breaker?" Elias smiled. "Actually, I've been offered command of a new type of vessel, one designed for exploration rather than defense. They're calling it the Horizon Seeker." Understanding dawned in Nema's eyes. A ship that seeks new possibilities rather than confronting known threats. Exactly. And it needs a first officer who understands the value of different perspectives. He looked at her questioningly. "Interested?" Nema gazed out at the assembled representatives, humans and Tesserans, former enemies now cautiously exploring cooperation. Then she looked back at Elias, the human who had seen potential where others saw only deficiency. "There was a time when I believed being cast away was the worst thing that could happen to me," she said softly. "Now I see it was the beginning of something far greater than I could have imagined." Her scales shimmered with vibrant patterns of blue and violet, confidence, satisfaction, purpose. "Yes, Captain," she said. "I'm interested. Let's seek new horizons together." Below them, the treaty was signed. Above them, stars beckoned. Countless possibilities waiting to be discovered by those willing to see beyond conventional strength, beyond traditional doctrine, into the vast potential of difference embraced rather than rejected. Somewhere among those stars, Nema knew, were others like her, individuals whose unique perspectives made them outsiders in their own societies. Perhaps she and Elias would find them. Perhaps they would show them, as Elias had shown her, that being different wasn't a defect. It was perhaps the greatest strength of all.